I'm fine. I'm sitting right here.
And I guess I'm ready. John, are you ready?
Ready?
Good afternoon. This is Jim Eskin. On behalf of Eskin Fundraising Training, it is my pleasure to welcome you to our Nonprofit Empowerment webinar series. Today's topic is the more generous gender, and we're very excited about our special guest. I wanted to start, I was making a sports analogy before, and what we call the GOAT. And that's not a bad thing. It's the highest compliment you can praise someone, and that is the greatest of all time. I'm one of the many who feel the late Gerald Tanis, who we lost in the year 2018, who just inspired so many of us in this profession to be a practitioner or to be a consultant. He wrote 19 books. The best known is the one called Asking, and it sold more copies than all the other books about fundraising put together. But okay, enough bragging about the late Gerald Tanis. He used to say, what's it take to be a great board member? And he started with the traditional 3 W's, work, wisdom, and wealth. And then he added a 4th one. And the 4th one was wallop. And Abbie, that was bringing passion to the table, which makes all sorts of things possible. And finally, you know, in his career, the last W he added was women. That's what makes a great nonprofit organization. And we're very excited to have someone who's truly a pioneer when it comes to women in philanthropy. I'm going to give her a fuller introduction in a moment, but Abbie J. von Schlegell has the credential CFRE, which not many, I think it's less than 5% of our profession has, but she also has the credentials FAFP, and that means she's a distinguished fellow as recognized by the Association of Fundraising Professionals. And Abbie, if I have it right, only 10 humans have ever received that honor. And so for everyone knows, more people have walked the moon. 12 have walked the moon, but Abbie's only one of 10. Abbie, it is such an honor to have you join us. And let me first ask, how is the von Schlegell family doing in West Virginia?
They're all fine.
That's wonderful. And again, thank you. She is a true pioneer in the study of women in philanthropy. We like to say that, Abbie, our audience is made up of nonprofit CEOs, executive directors, board members, volunteers, donors, and everybody can do something. That's the beauty about nonprofits. Everybody, through their gift of time and money, can do something. And nonprofits are always important, but we now live in a time of risk, and nonprofits are no strangers to risk. But we live in a time of uncertainty, and I don't care who you are, what organization you represent, the reality is there's probably a lot more you don't know than you do know. And that's the world we're facing. And it's in this environment, we like to say, nonprofits, whatever your particular mission is, you were essential before, and now that we're facing this crisis, your work, your particular roles are more essential than ever. Abbie, for our first show, we begun this a mantra, and I'm indebted to my wife, Andrea, for developing this graphic, Nonprofit Strong. And we have a little tradition here. We ask everybody in the audience to type in those 3 words, Nonprofit Strong. And Abbie, I'm going to quiz you. What are we?
Nonprofit Strong.
You passed. A little background and very little. I had a very fulfilling career in higher education and advancement, and I had a chance to work with a very impressive variety of business and community leaders through 3 higher education institutions. And I noticed they were fearless in everything they had to do in life. And Abbie, you know the answer, with one exception. What was that exception, Abbie?
I'm sorry. I lost.
I'm saying they were fearless in everything they had to do in their lives with one exception.
People don't like to ask.
That's right. And so I think part of it is that we as practitioners can do a better job of, I'm calling demystifying the art and science of fundraising. We want to welcome you to our learning community. We do a monthly newsletter, by the way. As a point of background, everybody is going to be sent a copy of the slides and the recording, and you can click there. If you're not on our distribution list, that will get you on. Not only will it get you a monthly newsletter, that it also will get you invited to each of these workshops. I'm a little behind Abbie. Last year, I wrote my first book, The 10 Simple Fundraising Lessons. It's a quick read, Abbie. It's only 80 pages.
Congratulations.
Thank you. But at this point, I usually bring our producer, John Largent, into the discussion to share a little logistic information. John is the producer. He is CEO of Game Day Media. And these webinars would not happen without him, and we have become like brothers. So John, if you would take a second to explain some of the logistical issues, particularly how people can type in comments and questions.
Good afternoon, everyone. Thank you for joining the webinar. And just want to remind you that if you have any questions, there's a place for Q&A and also for chat, but we prefer to have you answer all your, or ask all your questions in the chat bot. It's either at the bottom of your page or at the top of the page, depending on what kind of computer or platform you're using. But if you would use that to ask your questions, and we would encourage you to ask your questions early. There's going to be a Q&A session toward the end of today's webinar, and I think both Jim and Abbie will be answering those questions. And if you have any other questions that you want to ask, you can put those in, and I will be monitoring that chat room throughout today's webinar. Thank you.
We're excited. We are hosting free nonprofit webinars until the end of the year. And they're going to be every Wednesday, 4 to 5 Central Time. Abbie's in the Eastern Time Zone. And Abbie's so special, she'll become my first person to do 2 webinars in the same space of a month. She is going to also, she is an expert on board development. And so she is helping me lead the discussion on July 8th about board members stepping up to the challenge. Abbie, we like to think that you and I bring a lot of knowledge to the table, but in our live workshops and our webinars, we embrace the concept of learning community. And that means that the audience brings a lot of practical wisdom experience. And we like to think between you and me and our attendees that we can almost answer any question there is. Today, it's a birthday of one of our dear colleagues. I'm not allowed to say his last name, but his first name is Marv. And this is the mantra of his organization. By the way, we thank Marv for introducing Abbie and I. He points out, remember, money is not the end. Money is merely the means to the end. And philanthropy is about giving both time and money to make the world a better place. And boy, do we need that. Before I get to Abbie, I just want to say we like to think of fundraising is broken down into 4 distinct parts. The first part is identifying who you're going to ask for support and why do you think they would be a good fit. The second part is the all-important part of forging a personal and emotional bond between your donor prospect and the mission of your organization. The third part is the most obvious. That's something that Abbie teaches a lot, and that's the who, the when, the how, the why, for how much, and et cetera of the solicitation. And finally, stewardship is so important. That's how we acknowledge and thank donors, because after Abbie gives us a gift, say, for $10,000 this year, we're going to go back to her next year. We're going to ask her not only to give again, but consider making an increase. And we can do that if we're good stewards of the gifts she's given us. Okay, we want to take a little poll here, and we want to know what type of topics would you like to have addressed in the future? Type in A if it's discovery, B if it's cultivation, C if it's solicitation, and finally D for stewardship. Type in A, B, C, or D, and we'll give you about a whole 15 seconds. John, are we getting responses?
Yes, we are.
And the host and panelists cannot vote. We're disenfranchised, Abbie. Okay. So I see we're heavy on discovery. You know, each week, Abbie, it's been a little different, which makes me feel good. Now we want to ask you another question, and you type in A or B. Do you think fundraisers are born, A, or made, B? Type in A or B. Abbie, we can't vote. I think you and I have a particular bias in this issue. That's not to influence my audience. Okay, John, and they are voting?
Yes, they are.
So I agree with that.
I agree. That means that's right. That means we're in the right profession, Abbie.
How interesting that somebody answered C and there is no C.
Well, we're innovators. And we like to say that Abbie and I think we can take anybody with the Jeffersonian virtues of a knowing head and an honest heart and genuine passion for their nonprofit and their cause. We can turn them into a very successful fundraiser. Okay, enough for me. Now I'd like to bring on our special guest, Abbie von Schlegell. Is a genuine pioneer in the study of women in philanthropy, and she is going to share her wealth of wisdom and experience in the motivation, mindset, and triggers of women philanthropists. She is truly one of the best known and respected fundraising authorities in our profession. It's a little intimidating to be on the other end. She's been in the field for more than 40 years, as a consultant for about 20 years, as a senior development officer with 4 institutions. Abbie, if I had this right, you held key development positions at Stanford, where she was the major gifts director for the Silicon Valley, and then the University of Chicago in major gifts, capital campaigns, donor relations, to name just 2 of the many great institutions that she developed resources for. Abbie has earned so many honors. I'm going to skip a few on her. You know, the first one, again, she is only one of 10 individuals on the planet that ever earned the honor of Distinguished Fellow from the Association of Fundraising Professional. She was the editor of the first book on women's philanthropy. It reminds me, I like country before country was cool. You like women's philanthropy before women's philanthropy was cool. Her book, Women as Donors, Women as Philanthropists, was published in 1993, and it became a best-selling handbook. She opened her own consulting practice in the summer of 2007. And now what I'm very jealous of, she lives in Western Massachusetts, right near the famous Tanglewood facility, which has been the summer home of the Boston Symphony Orchestra. She's involved in a lot of volunteer activities. And again, Abbie, thank you so much for joining us. May we begin? We got questions for her, and then we're going to get to audience questions too. So, Abbie, you ready to begin?
Yep, absolutely.
Okay, let's begin. Hey, let's start with basic demographics. Can you explain the economic environment in which more and more philanthropic decisions are being made by women?
Well, it's two things. One, most economic decisions about anything are made by women in the home.
Yeah.
That's been true for decades. And it's very much the case that that's the case for philanthropy as well. It's in the numbers of 80 to 85%.
There is often also significant data supported that in general, women are more philanthropic than men. Why is this so?
It has to do with how women, not only how are raised, but I actually think it has to do with genes, as in genes, genes, not blue jeans. Women have much more empathy for others and are hardwired to care for others. We can be competitive, we can be entrepreneurial, we can be all of those things too, but we're very much focused initially on taking care of others. Think about when little girls are playing with their dolls. They're taking care of their dolls, they're dressing their dolls, etc. Boys are beating up everybody else.
Let's ratchet it up. Let's ratchet it up a little. What do men and women philanthropists share in common, and how are they different?
Unfortunately, Jim, I missed the first half of the question.
Okay, what do men and women philanthropists share in common, and how are they different?
Okay, certainly a fundamental thing about philanthropy is that you have to care about the organization. And the larger the gift, the more deeply the caring. So that's something that's common to men and women. Men have gotten much more attention and publicity about their gifts for the majority of history. And the whole issue and subject of women's philanthropy is really only about 30 or 40 years old. When some people at...
really started with you, too.
No, well, I just assembled the information initially. But there were people at UCLA. It started in higher ed, actually. There were people at UCLA and at the University of Wisconsin at Madison who said, wait a minute, we think we need to find out whether women are giving to us. And if so, who are they? Why are they giving? Asking all those questions. And I have to tell you, this is before the internet. So that book was published before the internet.
Okay.
So it wasn't as easy as it is now where you just look up the data.
Yeah. Well, thank you for writing that book. You know, we were talking, Abbie, about the 4 building blocks of fundraising being discovery, cultivation, solicitation, and stewardship. Could you take a moment to explain how fundraisers might treat women donors differently during each of these phases?
The most important phase to me is cultivation. And I actually try not to use that word. We were literally not allowed to use that word in the 10 years.
What word do you use instead?
Engagement.
Okay.
We just weren't allowed to use it. When I was on the Stanford staff, the vice president believes that cultivation was something that happened on a farm. So we learned every possible word you can imagine for cultivation.
Yeah.
I certainly use it now. I just have a hard time using it. I would have changed that chart slightly and made cultivation and engagement being the greatest amount of the time.
Yeah.
Asking is really, it's 5 to 10% of the time. And then I would put engagement first, and then I would put stewardship second. The difference, getting the key factor to get a woman engaged with your organization is to let her get involved. Even if she lives in India and you live in New York, she needs to feel like she has the opportunity to make a difference. And making a difference is the phrase here. She wants to make a difference with her money. One way you can really do that with unrestricted giving is to break up your unrestricted giving goal into buckets or categories that represent parts of your unrestricted operating budget.
Mm-hmm.
And let her give to athletics, let her give to the campus, let her give to the programs, all of which is part of your unrestricted budget.
How about stewardship?
Be sure to thank her and thank her. Don't thank him and assume that it's going to go to her. So if I make a gift and I get a thank you to Mrs. Victor von Schlegell, which is a name I've not had in more than 25 years, but somehow people still seem to find that in my record, I'm not even going to open it because it's not me. I want to thank you that's coming to me, Abbie von Schlegell.
You know, I think you can make a lot of mistakes. That to me is about the worst mistake you can make with a woman philanthropist.
The other thing that's important is to know how she wants to be addressed. Does she want to be Mrs. von Schlegell? Does she want to be Abbie von Schlegell? Does she want to be Abbie? Does she want to be AJ?
Yeah. Huh. Hey, when gifts come from couples, what's the typical role played by women?
She's usually writing the check.
I'd say it's a pretty important role.
It's because
You know,
that's financial
women,
research. That's not even
yeah,
philanthropy research. Financial research says that women write most of the checks in the household. They pay the bills.
yeah, yeah. Many women, as we know, outlive their spouses and benefit from large inheritances. Though they might have significant wealth, they think of themselves as wealthy. What are your recommendations on working with such prospects?
Help her to understand that actually it's her money now and she can make decisions about where she wants to give it. Many women, particularly older women, and I'm talking about a generation that's mostly gone now, the greatest generation, World War II. Most of them are now in their 90s, and so not as much making decisions about giving. But you want to help her understand that it's her money now, and she can decide to give it where she wants to. Many women in that situation just described continue to give where their husbands gave. That's a generational thing, and that generation is pretty much the greatest generation and the silent generation.
Yeah.
But I'm a baby boomer. Believe me, my generation doesn't think that way.
Uh-huh. Uh-huh. Abbie, do women tend to support different causes than men?
Not necessarily. Depends on what their relationships are. They often are very interested in leaving a legacy.
Mm-hmm.
And that's an important, they think a lot about their families and their children. And Jim, you will, having lived in the East, you'll appreciate the fact that I think we're about to have a big whopping thunderstorm.
Okay. Okay. I guess they won't be playing tonight at Fenway Park. We understand that giving circles are very popular with women. Can you share some of the rationale?
The nonprofit, the Women's Philanthropy Institute and the Lilly School of Philanthropy have done research about that. I think 95% of the giving circles that exist in the United States now are women-led and give to programs for women and girls. Women like to get together. Think about your mother getting together with her neighbors. Think about your Aunt Betsy who loves getting together with her sisters. Women do that much more frequently than men do.
Yeah, yeah. Hey, are there major differences in the very important job of recruiting women to serve on your nonprofit board than men?
Yes, again, explain to her how she can make a difference in leading your organization. As you know, I'm also a governance consultant, and I push organizations to try and recruit women onto their boards, but they have to be clear with them what the job entails. I'm also a huge believer in job descriptions for board members and position descriptions for committees.
And
And
by the way,
I want to be clear when someone gets recruited that philanthropy is part of the commitment.
by the way, folks, on July 8th, we're really going to dig in to board challenges and opportunities and roles. And I'm really looking forward to that discussion. We made a little reference to this before. You know, donors typically can make gifts several times larger from their estates and assets than they can from their income. What are your suggestions on the solicitation of legacy gifts from women?
Create a women's giving program at your institution. Make certain you call on her in person. Don't call on them, try calling on her, because she is going to end up with the money. There's been a lot of research about that, that women will end up leaving literally trillions of dollars to organizations if the organizations are connected with them. I'm watching questions come in, Jim. Do you want me to try and answer some of those, or are we just
I'll tell you what.
I'll
tell you what. We're getting close. Let's get a few. We're right ahead of schedule. But can we take a couple more minutes, and then we'll get by 4:30 earlier? By the way, your pace is fantastic. I mean, how many presentations we had? Market and just got it talked about 1,000. You think you've given 1,000 presentations and talks?
No, Mark's given more than me because Mark has made an effort to become a member of the National Speakers Association.
Okay, this one,
I know Mark Pittman really well.
Yeah, he's a great guy and he did a great job. Do you think women are as motivated by naming rights as much as men?
Much less so. And initially,
why?
Well, initially when women's philanthropy really started being recognized, there were women making extremely large gifts anonymously. Women don't like to stand out among their friends. And so if you all of a sudden become known as the woman who gave $1 million to the college down the street, and you have a building named after you, she just doesn't want that. And Hope Ogletree, who I know, just asked a question. So we'll get to you, Hope, in a minute. She just doesn't.
And guess what, Abbie? I'm just going to ask you 2 more questions.
Please.
And then we'll get to the audience, okay?
She doesn't want the recognition.
I want to hear.
Important point.
Okay. Is it your experience that women are more receptive to women solicitors than to male solicitors?
Depends on the age. Older women.
Okay, well, help me explain that.
Well, I'm talking about older than boomers, and I'm at the top of boomers. I was born in 47. So women who are older than that would prefer to have a solicitation from a man, because that's what they grew up with. The other point is who has the relationship with her. Which gift officer, which person at the institution, the president, the vice president, the board member, whoever it is, whether it's a man or woman, that's who the strongest solicitor is going to be.
Okay, good. And I have to get this question in because it's very, very timely. What do you find is working with women best in this new virtual world?
I'm sorry, with what?
What do you find is working best with women given the virtual cultivation, stewardship, solicitation environment we're in now, in social distancing?
Hope Ogletree just asked the question that is exactly the answer to that. There is just very recent research that more women are giving online right now to support the crisis and everything that's going on around it than men. It used to be the case that you couldn't make a large gift online. Well, now you can.
How about the cultivation by Zoom? Do you find it's any different cultivating or asking by a video conferencing medium?
I think it's much more difficult. I think it's much more difficult.
Okay.
And you have to build a relationship with someone before you start trying to ask on Zoom. I think it's really hard, but I also think you have to use social media and your own email to do a lot of cultivation. Also, I'm a big
Great.
fan of video.
I'll tell you what, our audience has been very patient. So, John, do you have some questions queued up? I will start, and then Abbie too. John, do you have some questions from the audience? And by the way, this is the arrangement that Abbie and I worked out. If it's a difficult question, Abbie would take it. If it's a ridiculously easy question, I'll take it. Thank you, Abbie. John, do we have any questions from the audience ready?
Yes, and Abbie can also see these, but the first question I see here is, isn't allowing giving to buckets a de facto restriction?
Actually, no. And that has been, it's something I worried about a lot because I started seeing it. And the first place I saw it was at Wellesley College, where I was the interim director of major and planned gifts for about 6 months.
Full campus. Beautiful. I've had lunch there many times.
It's gorgeous. And so they were dividing the annual fund up into different parts. And I said, wait a minute, can we do that? And there was a lawyer standing right there saying, yes, we've researched this. It's something we can do. And it's not restricted. It's designated. There is a significant difference between designated and restricted. The institution does not have to use the money for that.
Take a second to explain that difference. Explain the difference between restricted and designated.
Okay, restricted means you can only use it for painting the walls in the development vice president's office. That's restricted. Designated is, I'd like to paint the walls in the development office because I think it's ugly. It's hospital green, and I want to improve that.
You're saying one's binding and the other isn't?
That's exactly right.
Okay. How about some other questions? And Abbie, thank you. Your pace is Eastern Coast fast. I love it. Some more questions, John?
Yeah, are boomers as likely to join giving circles as they are more likely to give independently?
I think boomers were among the first to start giving circles, at least the people I know. And I've lived all the way across the country in my adult life. I started out in California. I'm an Angelino for anybody who's from California. That means I was born there. And then I lived in Northern California, a different state. And then I lived in the Chicago suburbs, and then I lived in Annapolis, and now I live in Western Massachusetts. Boomers were the first, boomer women were the first to start giving circles. And I think they like it because they get together with friends and can make joint decisions. I certainly was involved in starting several when I lived in Maryland, and enjoyed it a lot. So I think boomers are just as likely to do it. But remember, giving circles are a specific amount of money, typically often for a specific purpose.
We have a fantastic women's giving circle called Impact San Antonio in San Antonio.
It's very well known.
Started, and they've grown from giving $100,000 gifts, and last year they gave 6 $100,000 gifts. So,
wow.
John,
wow.
Some more questions? We're doing great on time here.
That's it from the audience at this point.
Okay. I'll tell you what, Abbie, what I'd like to do is kind of do a little summary here and bring you in and out of the discussion. And by the way, to everyone, we're going to get to our happy hour a little sooner than we thought. First of all, America is a tremendously generous a country. And we're seeing that now too, because needs have never been so great. And a majority of Americans give, and the average amount you see there, and also a great number of people volunteer. And Abbie will teach you that your volunteers is a very, very rich potential donor base. People who volunteer are much more likely to give. American philanthropy, we had Melissa Brown on, about a month ago, Abbie, and she edited Giving USA for 10 years and formed her own consulting firm. And she pointed out that actually philanthropy is responding better to the COVID crisis than it did to the Great Recession of 2008. Part of that is the stock market is held up remarkably well. So those of you Keep on doing what you're doing. Keep on cultivating or engaging. How's that, Abbie?
Yep.
Engaging and keep on soliciting and stewarding. And last year we hit, this chart stops at 2017, we hit a record 428 billion. That's more than $1 billion every day. Abbie will teach you, like me, we love money from foundations and corporations, but most of the fish are biting in the pool of individuals. And, you know, Giving USA has been the gold standard in the collection of data, I think now since 1956. And that percentage really hasn't changed much. They've been close. Individuals have accounted for about 70% of all American philanthropy, which has been steadily climbing. And so,
I'm sorry, what number
again,
did you say?
I love foundations. 70%
what number did
of
you
money
say?
comes from individuals. 70%.
No, actually, it's
68.
but it's not.
Usually,
because bequests are from individuals, and half of the foundation
okay,
number
well, and of course,
is family foundation.
well, thank you, right? And so if you add those up, you're getting close to 90%. You're
It's
getting
87,
close. Hey,
right.
Abbie, give me a fist bump. Okay, give me a fist bump. Okay, thank you, Abbie. And of course, men and women are always asking, can one person make a difference? You better believe they can make a difference. One of Irving Berlin's most famous show tunes was "Anything You Can Do, I Can Do Better." And that was loosely based on the life of Annie Oakley. And so as a representative of my species, and my gender, it makes me feel bad that almost in every measure we underperform women when it comes to making gifts of time and money. First of all, right now, and I don't know, Abbie, we didn't plan this, why do women live longer?
I have no idea.
Well, it's a good deal, isn't it? I got to tell you, my father was a master's level swimmer. He passed away way too young at the age of 71, and my mother lived to 93. By the way, until the last week of her life, she went to Zumba 3 times a week.
Whoa.
And yeah, she's my role model. And Abbie, you're saying actually in the U.S. this might be greater. Right now, this is from the Women's Philanthropy Institute. Women have globally about 40% of the wealth on the planet. Probably that share is bigger in the U.S. What would you think?
Yes, it's much bigger in the U.S.
Okay. Okay.
Because
Thank you.
the U.S. is one of the few places that has tracked giving for many years.
Right. And as Abbie was pointing out, I don't care what demographic subgroup you try to break it into, women are more likely to give and give more across every particular socioeconomic level and generation. Women are more likely to volunteer. Andrea, I'm sorry, I was looking at Andrea. Abbie,
yes.
Here. Why do you think women are more likely to volunteer?
Because of the nurture thing. They like to help other people. They like to help their families. They like to help other people. It's just, it's
and guess
ingrained.
What? When you volunteer, you're more likely to give time. You're more likely to give money.
You are 7 times more likely to give money.
Wow. 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 We're saying that men and women, they give differently, their motivations, the causes, their behavior. We're going to dig in a little more here. Would you accept this?
Yep, totally.
Women share because of a variety of reasons. Their giving is more about empathy for others. Us men are more interested in self-interest.
Also, he wants his name on the building. Or on the endowed professorship.
Is that changing? Are you finding now, as women take more prominent positions in the world, that they're more interested than the generation before having their names on buildings?
Slowly. But we haven't seen a lot of it yet.
slowly. Okay, we were talking about giving collective circles. This is from Women's Philanthropy Institute,
Right.
and you were even using a more robust number. I believe you were closer to 90%. So
Well,
women are
no,
kind
that
of
says
owning
something else.
giving circles.
That says something else. 70% of giving circles are majority women. They are, but they're also majority white. That number is probably majority of white, but there are now a number I know of giving circles even that are Native American women. I know of giving circles that are Asian women. I know of giving circles that are African American women in a whole bunch of different places. There's a new one I just heard about called Black Women Strong. Just heard about it yesterday.
Is it national or local?
Black Women Strong is national. And they have some very impressive women on
this
the
one
advisory
is
board.
probably, this is probably intuitive, but women are more likely to give to women's and girls' causes for a lot of reasons. I think a lot of it, Abbie, is because those causes have been underfunded until now.
Yes, that's exactly right.
So we're playing some much deserved catch up.
Yep.
And two, Women's Philanthropy Institute has measured satisfaction. And when women see an increase, the more they're satisfied with their gifts, the more they give. So it sounds like,
but that's all about
engagement. Yeah, go ahead. I'm sorry.
It's all about showing her how her giving has made a difference to the organization.
We were talking too, this was from the last year's report from the Women's Philanthropy Institute. Women, and you made reference, they're embracing technology more. They're actually making the majority of online gifts come from women.
The most recent
report
the guys
were the geeks.
The most recent report from the Women's Philanthropy Institute has everything to do with this. So WPI, Lilly School of Philanthropy, which is in Indianapolis. WPI is the Women's Philanthropy Institute. It is a part of the Lilly School of Philanthropy. And they publish reports called Women Give and the Year.
Yeah. And, I was looking at some of their information, and we're kept on talking about how men and women are different. Does this surprise you? The most similar group is entrepreneurs. There's not much difference between men and women entrepreneurs. Do you have a comment?
Nope, I think that's exactly right. And I got recruited to be a mentor for a program that is happening here in Massachusetts in a number of cities and locations in Massachusetts called Entrepreneurship for All. And I said to the person who was recruiting me, I said, I'm not an entrepreneur. He said, oh, of course not. Of course you aren't, Abbie. You only moved here to a place where you didn't know anyone and started your own business. Really? You're not an entrepreneur? I just had never thought of myself that way. But yes, there's lots of women entrepreneurs and lots of men entrepreneurs.
Yeah, and I'm saying the differences are much less distinct.
That's right.
And they have a lot more in common being entrepreneurs than the gender differences.
That's right.
Let's talk a little about the workforce. 73 or maybe might be 75% of the nonprofit workforce are women, and 70% of the AFP membership are women. I'm gonna throw a curveball at you, Abbie. Would you be concerned if 70% of the fundraisers were men? Is there a problem that we don't have much balance there?
When I joined the development profession, it was 89 or 90% of the fundraisers were men. I mean, I went to a conference and I was one of the few women. So I've been in development long enough to have seen that shift. No, I would not be concerned at all because I know what it's like. They're not as intuitive though. They don't pick up all the clues. Sorry, guys.
Let's talk a little about who's at the top. I find, Abby, one of the encouraging trends that, I think it's about 43% of nonprofit board members are women. That's a great thing. And that just, the corporate representation on boards, I think it's under 10%. So, and I think that gets back to where Gerald Panis said, that women help drive the success of nonprofits. And have you seen that change a whole lot over your career, where more and more women are on boards?
Yes, but you're leaving out the difficult part, and that is the number of CEOs and executive directors who are women, which is not high.
Okay, and let's go. I think that's something like in the low 20 to 25%, which
right.
There seems to be a mismatch. If we have 75% of the employees are women and only 20 to 25% are the CEOs or executive directors, something's wrong there, Abbie.
Yeah. And there are lots of organizations that are working on that.
Fix it. Yeah, we're going to fix that. As you said, I'm sorry.
And don't forget, some of their biggest donors could be women. But and the development officers are women or men. It really doesn't matter as much. But the real challenge is women moving up to the CEO position. And that's true in the corporate sector too, just as bad. And the corporate sector, actually, it's worse because the percentage of women on corporate boards has gone from less than 5%, more like 3%. Now I think it's actually between 10 and 20, which is fabulous. But the number of women CEOs is still low.
Yeah,
that's a great
I
slide.
think we can be proud of nonprofits that our 43% of board members now are women. And the whole point here is a nonprofit wants to achieve greater impact, and there's a lot to be gained by a diverse board. Abbie, we're going to close with a few general lessons, but we're doing great on time. I don't know, our dinner or happy hour is going to come earlier. Are there any last questions before I sum up here?
Yes, there is one question here. It says, I work in higher education. When I'm engaging with potential donors for the first time, is it helpful to send them a prospectus or documentation they can read ahead of time on our financial needs? Also, how much should I prepare the donor before the first conversation? Should I be formal or casual?
It depends on the
that's
donor.
A little tougher. I'm going to assign it to you.
It depends on the donor. I mean, what do you know about her? I hope you've done a lot of research about who she is, what she gives to, how she gets involved in your organization. I'm assuming this potential donor is a woman, because you're asking a question in a panel about women, a program about women. But I'm a big fan of sending something in advance, short, succinct, clear, so that you send something in advance. And being informal or casual, again, it depends on the donor. I cannot possibly answer that. I'm actually being in touch right this minute with that person who asked the question.
Okay. Abbie,
do you have something you want to add to that, Jim?
Is a lot of nonprofit. Again, I want to echo what you said. I think we tend to, who came up? Was it Dave Dunlap, Moves Management?
Oh, love Dave Dunlap.
We should feed our donor prospects, in progressive bites, not try to stuff everything down them.
That's right.
So I would be a little cautious. I like what you said, share information, but less is more.
Yes.
Engage them in conversation. Engage them, and then find out where their questions, their interests lie, and then feed them, not just feed them information, but feed them engagement. Now, you might not be able to physically show them the facilities. You can do that virtually. So let them dictate what type of information they want.
Well, I can give you a good example from
Don't give them the bathtub.
No, absolutely don't. Tease the information out. I can give you a good example from that's been happening here in the Berkshires. We have lots and lots of culture here and lots of donors who are donors to all that culture. And one of the theaters has been having weekly Zoom cocktail parties with 3 or 4 or 5 of their top donors, with the artistic director and the development director on the phone, or the education director, if that is appropriate for the donor. And they're on Zoom, everybody's on Zoom, and they're having an opportunity to ask questions, which they don't normally get to do. It's usually a big group. And so this is,
I love it.
It's really been smart.
It's really turning a negative into a positive.
Exactly.
Isn't it? Now, the sum up here, I'm telling nonprofits, this is not the time to take your foot off the gas pedal. Continue to identify prospects, continue to cultivate or engage them, continue to solicit them, continue to thank them. If anything, you should be communicating more now, because, by the way, it's going to be much more easier to get those folks at home and engage them virtually. This is not the time to put your fundraising programs on hold.
No.
You represent very important missions. And by the way, your mission is not going away. If anything, your needs are escalating. You want to ask yourself, again, what makes your organization unique? And also, you might need to pivot. A lot of organizations, are you on the front lines of addressing the COVID crisis? Or are you secondary? You should be asking yourself, how do you all help address the crisis at hand? And it's a huge crisis. Abbie, I call this my 3-prong return on philanthropic investment. Cool. I think every board and management should be in constant communication.
I agree.
Via virtual communication. And first of all, ask yourselves, what void does your nonprofit, I don't like reading slides, but I'm going to make an exception here. What void does your nonprofit fill not met by any other organization? How does your nonprofit improve the local economy and quality of life? And finally, if your nonprofit didn't exist, what would happen to those you serve? You should have some very serious, candid conversations with management, board, staff, key donors to help really Zoom, we're using that. And again, as Abbie's been saying, everybody can add some wisdom to the table. And right. So it's important that you engage a wide variety of stakeholders. And that's obviously management and board and staff, but also engage those whose needs you serve, those who benefit, and engage donors and volunteers. And the best board, we're going to dig into this real deep on July 8th, board, Abbie, but wouldn't you say the best board is when everyone is playing an active role?
Yep,
it might be
absolutely.
A different role. They have different strengths. They have different weaknesses, but they're all pulling an oar. That's the boat that's going to win the race. I wanted to close. Abbie, we have a good friend, Norma, and she reminded us. I mean, folks, we're digging out of a deep hole right now, to be honest. But the truth is, I can hear my mother saying, nothing lasts forever. And guess what? There is going to be an other side to all this.
Right.
And you all should be thinking about the other side. You all should think about, listen, you don't have to remind people how tough things are. How can you be a beacon of positive light? How can your nonprofit fuel hope and optimism about tomorrow? And I'm going to quote another of our colleagues, Laura Fredericks, who's the expert on the Ask in New York City. And I love this. Yep, we all know Laura. She's a lot on national media. Don't think of philanthropy as a zero-sum game. That being that if I get a pint of blood from Abbie, I mean, for me to get a pint of blood, Abbie's got to give up a pint of blood. You know, Abbie and I have been in this business a long time, And I think we could share this, Abbie, and sometimes people who aren't fundraisers don't appreciate it. I got to tell you, I honestly think the donor gets as more or greater satisfaction out of the
Absolutely.
philanthropic gift than the beneficiary.
That's right.
And so you're not taking anything away from them. You're giving them the opportunity to feel great. And that's what your job is, to tell your story, to engage. And I love the word inspire. You want to inspire donors about what their gifts will do. And Abbie, you've been explaining why that's so critical to women want to know the bottom line impact.
And thank you for having
Abbie,
a little
I
girl
like
there.
closing. One of my favorite poets, was the late poet Maya Angelou. And she said, people will not remember what you said. They won't even remember what you did, but they'll never forget how you made them feel. And I think that's our job in the fundraising and nonprofit sector, is to make our donors, our donor prospects, and our friends feel like they're the most important people in the world to us. I also like to end with a money-back guarantee, Abbie. I wonder if you'll double down on this guarantee. Your chances of getting the gift go way up when you ask. There is never a perfect time to ask. I can guarantee you, as you are thinking about different prospects to ask, there are a lot of other nonprofits that are considering the same prospects, and put yourself in the donor's shoes. It's not easy. You're not choosing between the good and the bad. You're choosing between the good and the good. So go out there and tell your story, engage and ask, and say thank you. Abbie, I end on this quote. We were talking about baby boomers because it just gives me goosebumps. This was what President John F. Kennedy said on June 10th, 1963, when he was giving the commencement address at American University. I went to George Washington, so that was a crosstown rival. And it's almost like he is speaking to us right now.
You bet. Oh gosh, that's
in
great.
June of 2020. President Kennedy said, I love this line. Our most basic common link is that we all inhabit the same small planet. We all breathe the same air. We all cherish our children's future, and we are all mortal. Abbie, when I see those words, I get goosebumps.
Yep, I agree.
I want to thank our producer, John Largent. By the way, for Abbie, let's give me a fist bump. We're going to give everyone an extra 2 minutes, which I don't know about you. Every nonprofit employee I know needs more time. Give me a fist bump. We ended up on schedule.
I can't.
Ended up ahead of schedule.
I lost the picture. I don't know where you are.
Okay. Okay, we'll do that later. And I want to thank Abbie von.
There you go.
Hey, okay. And she really is. She's in the space of goat, in the good goat, and that's the greatest of all time. I think no one has done more to advance the concept, the study, interest of women in philanthropy, and therefore aided philanthropy. And she has inspired so many professional and volunteer fundraisers. And it's
you guys, I did not pay him for this.
To share an hour with you. That's right. And by the way, we're going to do this again on July 8th, and we're going to talk about board members stepping up to the challenge. And so I want to thank John and Abbie. I want to thank all the representatives of the nonprofits who form a very robust learning community. This is what we're going to be doing. We're going to post a very brief summary on LinkedIn and Facebook right now. And then, probably early this evening, if we're lucky, we'll post the recording and slides. Everybody who registered will get it, but also
where do you
we're going to
post them, John?
both on
Jim, where do you
LinkedIn
post them?
and Facebook.
Where
on
do you
LinkedIn
post them?
and Facebook.
Oh, okay.
Jim Eskins on LinkedIn and Facebook.
Yeah. Okay.
Okay, so I want to thank Abbie and John and our learning community. And we look forward to seeing you next Wednesday, where we're going to have the Honorable Henry Cisneros will be our guest, and he'll be
Very
talking
cool.
about the synergy between government, business, and nonprofit sectors, because I know no one who has had such prominent leadership roles in all three sectors. So everyone, have a good evening, and we'll see you next Wednesday. And Abbie, thank you again.
Thank you, Marv.
And everyone
Thank
be
you, Jim.
safe.
Appreciate it.